This is Lightning Power Lunch on the Lightning Audio Network with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli.
I know. I thought in the regular season over the last few years we were pretty all right, but the playoffs was just a different story. I mean, obviously it didn't help that we played Stanley Cup champions 2 times in a row. But I mean, if you want to be the best, you have to be the best. But to start game 1 at home in front of our fans and get kicked, I mean, that's not the way to do it.
I'm not sure what to do. I have a mic in front of me, partner. What are we supposed to do here? We're back.
Yes,
We're back. Very
it's
excited.
It's like riding
to be
a bike,
back.
my friend.
It's very good to see you. It's very good
to
talk to you. Steve Ersnick, of course, our executive producer. Vasi chimed in there early on. We've got a lot to get to. I mean, the off season is what it is, and almost refreshing fans of what's happening. We've had a arena change in terms of the name, and that'll take. How many times do you think? Not us, but maybe us, but players, analysts call it previously what it was. And I'm not going to mention the name. Should I? Amalie Arena? Does it matter? Maybe it doesn't. I don't know.
The arena formerly known as Amalie.
Formerly known.
Yeah.
And how many
International
times?
Arena.
Yeah. Hey.
So, look, it'll be on the ice.
It will.
When you're in the building, you're like, where am I? Just look to the ice. It'll remind you.
It's a good point. So, a lot of things happening. We've already have questions coming in, and an interesting injury to start the year for Tampa Bay. But, it's funny. Not that we want to start slow, easing our way into the season, because we're going to have a lot of time to talk about what are your keys this season? What are your biggest question marks, if you have any? And look, around the NHL, there are some teams who are dealing with some interesting signings potentially coming up with players of their own. And, whether that's Connor McDavid, whether that's Sidney Crosby, Minnesota's having some of those conversations.
Yeah.
Kaprizov, and of course, maybe under the radar, but somebody that we've talked about a lot on this show, of course, is Ryan McDonough, which was, I think, was it Ed who had an article about that today. So a lot of interesting dynamics around the NHL. I think the Lightning big picture, and we've talked about this a number of times at Bolts Radio if you want to get involved in the conversation. The window is still open for the Lightning. I think I've said this to you a number of times over the last handful of years, even when they were winning cups, that every year there is a certain level of expectation for each team. Some of it is realistic. Some of it is not, depending on the team and the organization. But I think for the Lightning, for the most part, we've always said as long as they keep that core together, they're going to be in the conversation or in the mix as a team who could compete for a Stanley Cup. I've often said some years you have a better chance of winning than others, and that's various reasons. You could just have a bad year, you could have injuries, or it's just not your year. It happens. There's another team that comes in and it is their year. But I still think overall, without getting into the weeds right now, and we can later on for sure, it's a team that still has not only playoff aspirations, but it's a team who still feels like a Stanley Cup is something they want to achieve. Whether we think or other experts think they are a favorite to win the Stanley Cup right out of the gates, we don't usually go there. We let the season play out. But I don't think I'm saying anything unusual, partner, when it comes to this organization and this franchise with the players they do have coming back, that, look, it's still a good team. And as long as you're in the mix, that's all you can ask for heading into training camp, preseason, and then the regular season in a couple of weeks.
I think a lot of fans are nervous. I don't want to speak for the fans, but we heard from some of them as we did our show through the playoffs, and then we continued through the draft and the start of free agency, which was really short, right? Most of the free agent activity occurred in early June, and then we were still in the air at that point. So what I heard from a lot of Lightning fans was concern that the Lightning didn't do more to address the fact that they've lost to Florida in the first round the last 2 years. And, in Vasi's quote, he even said, to be the best, you have to beat the best. And they lost to the champs in each of the last 2 years. So I think that maybe is one of the biggest questions the fans have going into the season, which is the Lightning kind of made some moves around the edges, but it was a far less volatile offseason than, let's say, 2024 was. And what does that mean? Well, we're going to find out what it means. But there's not one fan out there. There's not one analyst out there. There's not one person involved directly with the team, player, coaches, or managers. Nobody knows exactly what is going to happen. And a team that wins the cup one year may not be able to replicate the level of play that they showed the following year, even if they are bringing back much the same team. And I'm talking about the Panthers, who are basically bringing back the same team that won the cup last year. Does that mean that they're going to reach the level that they reached in the playoffs last year? No, it doesn't. They might, but we don't have the answer to that question. They're going to have to go out and show it. Right. To be honest, why did a lot of people pick the Lightning to beat the Panthers before that series began last year in the first round? It's not that they didn't think the Panthers could win the series, but they were basing these predictions on what they saw in the regular season. The Panthers were a different team in the regular season, less good, less impressive, right. Good enough. They were phenomenal. They were championship level in the playoffs. Can they reach that level again? That's really about the Panthers, but it's also kind of sort of about the Lightning. Because if the Lightning are going to play the exact same way that they played in last year's playoff series against a team that doesn't quite execute at quite the same level, maybe that series doesn't go 5. Maybe it goes 6. Maybe it goes 7. Maybe somehow the Lightning win that series. Again, not to rewrite history, there were reasons why the Lightning lost that series. Vasi touched on not playing well at home, which was certainly part of it. Kucherov talked about the power play being ineffective in that series. That was part of it. But I think a big part of it was they ran into a team that was playing at a championship level. So we're going to say, well, the Lightning needed to do more, at the very least, to try and get past Florida. There may be some truth to that, in that Florida is going to be a very tough team to get past, right? But there are too many moving parts here. We don't know how the Panthers are going to look in this upcoming season. If we're going to presume they're going to make the playoffs, who's to say that they're going to be able to play at the level they played at last year? And maybe the Lightning will find a higher level themselves. They need to get into the playoffs. This is my long-winded way, kind of circling back to the fact that Julian Breezeball likes his team, and like a lot of teams around the league this year, the Lightning did not make many big-time changes. Now, last year in the playoffs, they didn't have Oliver Bjorkstrand. They had injuries to Yanni Gourde, Anthony Cirelli, and Victor Hetman that were more than just Nicky Knack. They didn't have Brandon Hagel for half the series last year. So even if we look at last year's team and see how they performed in the playoffs, they were at a slight disadvantage just based on circumstances with injuries, and we don't know how that is going to unfold this year. So we touched on this a lot during the offseason, Greg, or I should say after the Lightning went out, and I'm just going to repeat it again. The Lightning based what they did and did not do during the offseason more on what Julian saw during the regular season, when they were basically a top 5 team in the most important categories metrically in the NHL. And not only did Julian say, I like my team, he also said that if we can replicate that this year, this upcoming year, he's like, I'm going to be really happy. So you were asking about the window. If the Lightning are a top 5 team in offense, defense, 5-on-5, power play, and penalty kill, they were 6th last year in the regular season, but let's extend that and say, that's still pretty good. They are going to be one of the favored teams to do well in the playoffs. They are. They didn't do well in the playoffs last year, but that doesn't take away from some of the things they accomplished during the regular season. So those are kind of my opening thoughts. I mean, the window, Julian was actually asked about that. He's like, look, we have 2 players in their mid-30s, Victor Hedman and Ryan McDonough. Everybody else is not in their mid-30s. They're in their 20s. They're in their early 30s. Like, there's more runway there.
Yeah.
And yes, Victor Hedman and Ryan McDonough are 2 of the most important players on the Tampa Bay Lightning, but they're not playing as though the tread is coming off the tires. So that is how Julian is looking at it. And at least in the short term, this upcoming season, I think he feels pretty good about the team that the Lightning are going to be able to field. And today was the first day of training camp. I was over at the TGH Iceplex, which is not far from where I live. So I saw the early group. The early group, which is mostly the players that were playing in that prospect tournament, in which the Lightning went 2-1 and did quite well. And then at 11:30, kind of the 2 other groups took the ice. And on one sheet was what we'll say is like mostly the NHL guys.
Yeah.
And then the other sheet was kind of mostly the guys that are going to be competing maybe for a few spots, but also more likely than not going to Syracuse. So look, we can go through who was on which sheet and how they ran the lines and all of that. But I'll just say it's good to be back and good to be talking hockey. And we're hitting the ground running because next week, the Lightning have their 4 preseason games.
Here we go, baby.
As usual. Right. So we will get into the weeds about like what spots are open, what prospects maybe are taking a step forward, maybe turning some heads, even if it doesn't mean that they're going to make the opening night roster. Maybe they're kind of planting a flag and like, hey, notice me when it's time for a call up 6 weeks into the season.
We've said this before, and I think the best teams are the ones that have depth, but also internal competition that improves that bottom 6 that can help alleviate some of the pressure that the top 6 has. We've talked about the Lightning's depth at great length throughout the years, and we've called where they've had tremendous depth, and we've called when maybe they haven't, and they've had to lean on their top 6 or top 9 a little bit more. People forget that Bjorkstrand was out, last year for the playoffs, and having him back healthy, ready to go, I think is going to be a nice boost. Of course, you want him for the playoffs. I think we've talked about, we do think the Lightning have some intriguing players, younger players who can fit in a bottom 6 role, particularly the 4th line. Nick Paul's going to miss some time though, partner, to begin the season.
Yeah, that was the news that broke yesterday.
Yeah, and
to us.
Right.
The Lightning already knew that this was going to be the case.
That is correct. And I guess it was an injury that they tried to rehab rather than go the surgery route, but he's going to be out at least until early November. Upper body injury. So that's going to open up some, maybe a little bit more competition.
Spot, certainly.
And Julian said he doesn't have a problem breaking camp with 14 forwards.
Yeah.
I guess cap isn't as big an issue as we've seen before, right?
Right. So. Yeah, so there are actually some slight changes to kind of the way the cap is going to impact teams. Speaking plainly, there's a new CBA that has been ratified. It's going to go into effect next year, but they actually pulled some elements from the next CBA and put them in place this year, one of which is essentially you need to be cap compliant in the playoffs, which is a huge change.
That's a big deal.
Right? There's another change that Julian mentioned, which is you can't pull in a third party at the trade deadline, which a lot of teams have done, including the Lightning.
They do.
For example, the Yanni Gourde deal last year, the Lightning made a trade with Seattle. They pulled in a third team. Was it Detroit? I think it might have been Detroit to pick up part of Yanni's salary so the Lightning could fit the salary under the cap, and then the Lightning made a trade with Detroit in exchange for them picking up a portion of the salary. Now it just has to be a straight line trade, like a two-way trade, basically, between 2 teams. You can't pull in a third team. So that may affect what's going to happen at the deadline. But, yeah, I mean, so we learned some things yesterday, one of which is Nick Paul is going to be out until early November, which means that a spot that we didn't expect was going to be open at the start of the year will be open. But because the Lightning are not as tight to the cap, even though these other changes that I just mentioned may affect what teams can and cannot do at the deadline, as it relates to the Lightning, they have a little bit more room under the cap than they have in past years, which means that they could, without being really, really up against it, carry 23. Much of last year, they carried 21 and 22 players. So if they want to carry 14 forwards and 7 defensemen and 2 goalies, that would be 23. That's really what Julian was talking about. But even if they aren't carrying 14 forwards, somebody who would either not be on the team or sitting out, right, on the team and being scratched is going to be in the lineup because Nick Paul is not in the lineup for the first month. And we can go through how they ran the lines on that kind of NHL sheet to kind of give the fans at least day one of camp how things are shaking out. You want to get to that?
We can.
Yeah.
Jump in because I think, a lot of reporters have been, alluding to does a guy like Jack Finley get an opportunity,
Right.
sliding into these areas. We know the Lightning brought in a couple of guys in the offseason, under the radar. You and I talked about it before. We signed off completely, but there are those conversations. Where does Yanni Gourde slot in now? If
Sure.
Nick Paul's out. So I think those are valid questions. But
And what I'm gonna share with the fans here, like, this is not like locked in. It's never locked in with John Cooper as the head coach because he will switch things up mid-game. And also the way they set up these units, there were only 12 forwards on the one sheet. There were 8 defensemen. So understand that, like, the Lightning are going to have more than 12 forwards on the NHL roster. So take this all with a grain of salt. But you had Point, Kucherov, and Gensel, the line that was so effective last year. Hagel and Cirelli were together with Gage Gonsalves. So Gage, who had probably the largest improvement from the beginning of last year to the end of last year of any Lightning player.
No
I don't
doubt.
think I'm going out on a limb saying that. Begins this season playing with Cirelli and Hagel. And Gonsalves was one of the Lightning players who I would say had an impactful series against the Panthers. So you're asking about Yanni Gourde. He's centering the next line with Geekie and Bjorkstrand. And then the fourth line, Pontus Holmberg. Lightning were able to get him because Toronto did not qualify him last year, is with Gergensons and Chaffee. Those are your 12 that were on kind of, I'll call it the NHL side of the ice or the NHL side of the rink, the facility this morning. On D, Hedman Moser, McDonough Chernak, Emil Lilleberg, Darren Radish, and Declan Carlisle and Max Crozier. And then you had Vasilevsky and Johansson. That was the one group. The other group, I confess, I didn't like stick around long enough to see how they ran the lines, but some players on the other ice are going to probably get moved up at some point. None of this is like locked in. Lightning are going to probably mix things up and try different combinations. And certainly as we get into the preseason schedule next week, we're going to see a mix of, basically the players that I just mentioned with other players and some players from the early group, which I would really call like prospects.
Yeah.
Many of whom may be returning to their amateur teams.
Gonsalves was phenomenal. As you mentioned, he got better as the season wore on and was one of their better players. And I think that's what you wanted to see from the younger core. I think in addition to him, the one player that we took the most questions outside of Isaac Howard was Crozier. And where was he going to slot in?
Because Nick Perbix is now in Nashville, so
yeah. And so
Crozier
I think
bumps up the depth chart.
I will say this. I think, and again, I don't like to preface this. It should be obvious. Time will tell, all the cliches. We don't know how training camp's going to play out, preseason games. I think a lot of people will be somewhat shocked if Crozier's not starting the year with the big club.
Right.
Take that however you want. But if you felt like he was ready last year and maybe somebody blocking a roster spot has moved on and Crozier has done nothing to suggest that he's not ready this year, that would be an interesting situation to monitor this year, understanding the back end. As you mentioned, the top 4, I think, are pretty much, set in stone, and that's fine. We understand that. Again, we talk about this. Maybe depth is one of those things we talk about this year. It's a little bit of a theme, not only at the forward position, but on the back end. Okay, so who's that bottom pairing defense? Is Crozier going to be part of that? Should he be part of it? And I think a lot of Lightning fans partner based off of what they've seen, what they want. You probably feel like he should be in a top 6 at the very least, a top 7 role with the Lightning heading into this season.
Well, and the Lightning could dress 7D,
Yeah.
which they've done certainly frequently. They did it a fair amount last year. Some of that was based on the lineup configuration too, where they only had the 21 or 22, and they had enough defensemen to be able to dress 7 and scratch 1. So Crozier and Lilleberg played a lot together 2 years ago in Syracuse, and they played together some when they both were up with the Lightning in the second half of the 23-24 season. Crozier didn't get much time last year, and some of that was just based on numbers, and he was hurt at the start of the year. But I think it is an interesting question that you posed, if they are going to dress 6 regularly and they don't look at doing a rotation, they're just like, these are the top 6 right now. And number 7, you're just going to have to hang in there and get in when you can get in. Is Crozier going to be in that mix, and will he return to a situation where he's playing with Lilleberg? They also moved Moser a little bit last year because they did have Hedman and Radish together. And, Radish is the other right-handed defenseman, or defenseman who plays the right side, because Moser is a lefty, but he plays the right side, along with Chernak, who is a righty, who plays the right side. Like, pulling Darren Radish out of the lineup takes something out of your lineup. He's got one of the hardest shots on the team. He's got great offensive instincts. I think he's turned into a very well-rounded NHL defenseman. So, these are good problems to have, as you mentioned, Greg, because it's competition. Right. But some of this will get sorted out as the Lightning get through the preseason and into the regular season and check on kind of the mix and the chemistry. And that bottom pairing, if we want to call it that, that may be the one they're focused on the most, because we know McDonough and Chernak make a great pair, and Hedman can play with Moser. Hedman can play with Radish. We've seen both.
I think here's what I'll say about that whole situation. Then I want to get to some sound bites that we want to play, and then we have a ton of questions starting to pour in. I agree with you about Radish. I think, much like Perbix has turned himself into a very solid NHL defenseman. If Radish is probably in your top 4, maybe not as strong, but I think if he's in your top 7, I think you're okay. I think. And
when you say top, let me just interject here, Greg. When you say top 4, to me, what that means is top 4 minutes. Because if you're playing with Victor Hedman,
correct,
but Hedman is playing in other situations, and you are number 5 or 6 in minutes among defensemen, you are not in the top 4. Even though people will look at the pairings and be like, why is he in the top 4? It may not be the case.
And that's fair.
So really, to me, it's more about like usage rather than partner.
And I agree with
that.
But I also
not always, but in this instance.
But I also think it's fair to say in this instance, the top 4 for the Lightning, as currently constructed, are the ones that are going to be playing a good amount of minutes.
JJ Moser.
Hedman. Correct. Yeah. Yes. That's what I'm saying. However, I do think if you feel like you've got some upside with your back end, particularly the bottom pair, maybe in a year where you feel like you've got some solid depth, Radish is more of that interchangeable piece than he is somebody who is playing regularly in the top 6. So he can play whenever you want. If you want to have him in your bottom pair, do it. If you want to have him as your 7th defenseman and sit, that might be the guy. Or if you want to dress 7, he can play. I guess what I'm saying is I think for me the time is to see what Crozier can do.
Yeah.
And I'm willing to sacrifice some minutes somewhere else. And if that comes from Radish, so be it, because I think the upside of Crozier with regards to what the Lightning want, but more importantly, what they need, I think he maybe has more upside than Radish, even though Radish is an experienced NHL defenseman. But I think it's more about the team and their depth overall than it is a knock on Radish, if you want to take it that way.
Yeah, and Crozier's situation now, like, I'm not sure that he has anything more to prove at the AHL level. And
agreed.
There may be a question like, he may not benefit anymore from being in the NHL. Like
I
his
think that's
game
right.
is ready to grow at the NHL level. Like in order for his game to grow, and I'm speaking not with any sort of inside knowledge, I'm kind of giving this hypothetical.
Yeah.
If his game is to grow, it needs to grow at the NHL level. And if the Lightning feel that way based on his age and his status within the organization, which is to say promising young defensemen that they hope will be a part of their defense core for years to come, it's kind of like now is the time, right?
I would agree. I think that's part of it too. Like there's an expiration date for how long you can keep a guy in the minors, and sometimes it can be detrimental. And it was kind of the argument we had a little bit with Barry Boulay.
Right.
He's going to go. Oh,
but he was given opportunities.
He was, but you didn't want to keep seeing him down in the minors and be like, okay, like at some point you got to play him, and if he doesn't show that he's a regular for the Lightning, that's fine. But at some point, if you're leading the league in scoring and if you're consistently dominating at the AHL level, even if you're not an NHL regular, at some point you got to find out if he is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's not that extreme. I don't think with Crozier, defensemen take
No.
longer to develop. We get that, but I think there's just a lot there to see that I want to see, and I actually think can elevate the Lightning's back end to a degree. Again, big statement in a sense, because the season hasn't started yet. A lot of things can happen. But I think we've seen enough from Crozier to say, that guy looks like he's got it. Let's see how good he can be. And I think that's just something we're going to monitor as well. We've got a ton of questions coming in. Go ahead, partner. You want
I'll just say in one of these like subtle signs that are not overt, but we can certainly notice them and read into them. Crozier got to change his number this year.
Good point.
So like when he first came up, it's like, here, kid, number 65. This is your number, right?
Yeah.
And that's the number he's worn when he's been up with the Lightning the last couple of years. But I believe his number in Syracuse is 24. So in camp this year, he's wearing 24. So like
That's
you reach
not
a point where it's
got
like, okay, Max, do you want your number or do you want the number that we
That's a
gave
fair
you?
point.
Now, Lilleberg was given 78.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Crozier has always been 24. Lilleberg was given 78, and he kept 78, which that's the other way to go. It's like, all right, they gave me 78. I've done pretty well with this number.
Yeah.
So I'm going to keep this number on my back.
Anyway,
Crozier is.
That's a great point by you.
There's a
though.
number change for Crozier.
Yeah. At Bolts Radio, if you want to get involved in the conversation. Before we get to a question I believe you had for Cooch yesterday.
Yesterday was media day.
Yes.
So the players, some of the players, the main players, honestly.
Yeah.
And Julian Breezebaugh came out and met with the media one-on-one. They came out one at a time speaking to a group of the media.
Gotcha.
And fielded questions.
Yes, and we're going to listen to a little bit of that here, but I want to let the audience know you've got a chance to win 2 tickets to every concert, Lightning game, and event at Benchmark International Arena for an entire year. With our Golden Ticket contest, you can enter at tampabaylightning.com/golden ticket. You can also submit additional entries by taking photos next to our custom-designed benches that double as public art we've located throughout the Tampa Bay community. The sweepstakes ends on September 28th. Go to tampabaylightning.com/golden ticket for all of the details. All right, partner, I want to get to the question here about the power play you asked Nikita Kucherov. Then let's get to some questions right here on Lightning Radio.
Power play didn't have Stamkos last year, right? But it had a very, very good percentage at the end of the year. How do you feel the year went on the power play, and what are you looking forward to this year on the power play?
Power play was bad in the playoffs. So whatever happens during the season, who cares? Playoffs was bad. So you can't really say we're number 3. When we play against a good team, we, won for. So that I really took it, I really took it personal, and, that's something that, you hate to see, and you're just hungry to go back on the ice and work on things, and, why that didn't work and why is that. And so, you go out there and you work in the game, and hopefully, you find, the solutions for the next year and be better. But obviously, not having Stammer on the left side is, first of all, you don't have the one-timer. There's no respect on the left side, and there's a lot of if you have a lefty, there's they care less now. I think we need to have the right puzzles on the power play to make sure it's working. During the season, you can go against the top 5 teams and be bad, and then you go against the top bad teams and score a few, and then all of a sudden your stats are looking better, and everybody forgot about the top 5 teams that we didn't score. So I think the statistics, it's all kind of, I don't know. I don't look at them. So I think we got to do better during the playoffs.
First off, shocked that Kucherov talked that long. Actually, gave some insightful
so it wasn't
answers.
just my question. He was very talkative from the get-go, and I said afterward, I think that's more. I heard more from Nikita Kucherov in 10 minutes yesterday than I maybe have heard from him speaking in a group in the last 10 years. So it was very informative. Look, he has a great hockey mind, and for him to pull up the curtain a little bit and share some of his thoughts was terrific.
What did you make of his thoughts? Because I tell you what stood out for me. Nobody really cares what you do in the regular season. And you and I have kind of had that fun argument.
Well, he said he doesn't look at the stats, but he also said that he basically said that our power play was better against bad teams during the regular season and not as good against the top teams. I don't have the data to back that up. They were one of the top power play percentages, though, during the regular season. What I will say, and what we talked about a lot on the show last year, was for the first unit in particular, they never really settled in to a formation, rhythm as they had been able to do when Stamkos was on the power play. And what Cooch said was, first of all, you're pulling out one of the best one-timer shots in the game. In the history of the game. It's just incredible. Right. And you have Kucherov who can sell one thing but do another and get the puck across to Stamkos quickly, which meant that the penalty kill team can't react in time often. Mm-hmm. And then you're giving it to somebody who can shoot it hard and shoot it accurately. Right. So look, Stamkos was affected by not having Kucherov on the power play that he was on, but Kucherov was also affected by not having Stamkos, certainly. And when they put a lefty there, what Kuch said was there's no respect, which, you are taking away the one-timer.
That's what stood out, too. They tried
different things. Yeah. Braden Point was there at points. Chafee was there. They tried Bjorkstrand there. Those are all righties. They put Kuch on the left side. There was another question where Kuch was like, I'm paraphrasing here, but basically he's like, when everyone is moving around, they're not sure what they're doing. So, Kuch is the conductor of the power play. So the conductor likes to know, okay, the bassoon is coming in now, right? I think Kucherov's preference is to be at his spot on the right side of the ice.
For sure.
And orchestrate it, right? And see what's happening and not be not on the same page as the other players on his unit. And I think when he was on the left side, there was less certainty about maybe what everybody else was doing, which is interesting because Edmonton's power play, which is also an excellent power play, that is a power play with a lot of movement.
Yeah.
You watch their power play, and part of it's McDavid is dangerous in motion, but their pieces are always moving around the offensive zone. The Lightning's power play, when it's been at its best, the top unit especially, I would say is more static, but not static, because Kucherov, from a standing position, can find openings. Those openings are very, very hard to defend because he's such a magician. But what he's basically saying is last year, the puzzle pieces didn't fit. So I think that this is an ongoing
that's the
topic
question
this year. Yeah.
And you and I are going to discuss it. Initially, our observations, because we saw it last year without Stammer.
And let me just, before
go
you
ahead.
get into that,
Yeah.
the part about the playoffs, like he was not happy. Okay, so they had a great power play percentage-wise during the regular season. He's like, we didn't score in the playoffs. They scored 2 power play goals through the series against the Panthers. Had the power play done more, it really would have helped the Lightning's cause. And so I think that is just kind of the added part to this, that the Panthers were able to dismantle the Lightning's power play when the stakes were at their highest, which is why Kucherov said, which you took out of that, which is like the regular season doesn't matter because we didn't get it done in the playoffs. And he's like, I took that very personally.
And he'll be motivated. I was just going to ask you, and we can ask our audience at Bolts Radio, and we will get to some questions here that are trickling in. Hang tight. Initially, partner, when we take a look at the power play, with everything Kucherov said, knowing that he is a magician, but part of what made Kucherov magical was having somebody on the other end that could finish. And, hockey, it's different than finishing in basketball or whatever. But you had somebody there that was not a slam dunk, but a big-time threat, because you did have to pay attention to Stamkos, who is somebody that's going to go down into the Hall of Fame. And whether you thought his play declined 5-on-5 or not, Steven Stamkos was still very, very good as a weapon on the power play. You take that out. One, initially here, is there somebody you'd like to see fill that void? And two, if the power play is going to change slightly, does that mean more of Kucherov not setting up where he always sets up, and just the guys are going to have to react to him? But having him stationed there isn't as effective this year than it was when Stamkos was playing, because how could you possibly fill that void, at least with anybody right now on that roster?
So we're going to see when they start working on the power play.
Yeah.
And they tried a lot of different things last year. Now they've had an off season. Jeff Halpern's had an off season to digest it and maybe go back to the drawing board. But again, we can't ignore the fact that there were very few power plays in the NHL that had a better percentage than the Lightning's power play percentage last year. So even with all of that, and again, I don't have the data to back up what Kucherov was suggesting, which is they kind of feasted on the bad penalty kills and didn't do as well against the better penalty kills. All I know is at the end of the year, their power play was right at the top. It wasn't number one, and it wasn't as high. The percentage wasn't as high. They had a good year last year on the power play. Yeah. They did not have a good series against the Panthers, though, on the power play. So it's not like the second coming of Stamkos dropped from the sky, right? They don't have anybody who can shoot a one-timer from the left circle, even in the, forget about the same block. We're not even in the same neighborhood as Stamkos, because there are very, very few players out there that can do that. So what do you have? Well, here are your righties. You have Point, you have Bjorkstrand, you have Chaffee. Okay? They tried Bjorkstrand after the trade briefly at that spot. I believe Bjorkstrand's shot is one of the best in the league. But it is dangerous as a wrist shot, not a one-timer. I have not seen him, and again, I'm going to see him more now that I'm seeing him play regularly every game. I just can tell you from watching this guy in the league, his wrist shot, we talked about this last year after he came over from Seattle, his wrist shot, he can score from distance and pick corners.
Yeah.
But I have not seen him score as much where the puck is coming at him quickly and he's one-timing it with the same effectiveness, basically. It's almost like he has it on his stick blade and he's snapping it, or he's accepting a pass, stopping it, settling it down, and snapping it. Okay? That doesn't really work as well on the power play as the Lightning have it set up, because the key is to get that puck across and then to the net quickly. So, I mean, you could try and stop it and shoot it, but we didn't really see that from Oliver last year, and it was frankly brief time that he was at that spot.
Right.
The other part is that the angle is tougher. So where Bjorkstrand ended up before he got hurt was in the bumper. So the bumper as a righty is available to the Kucherov pass. It's just that if the guy at the left circle, they don't worry about him, basically what Kucherov was saying is like, they're not worried about that. That means they can focus on the other options that Kucherov has and key more on those, including the pass to the bumper. But we saw Bjorkstrand score some goals from the bumper, where the one-timer, it's not as hard of a pass. It's more sliding to him, and he can snap it. And when you're in the middle of the ice, you have more of the net to shoot at. Your angle is not as sharp, right? So they have a couple of options with Bjorkstrand, who I would expect will be on the top unit. They could put him in the bumper. They could put him in the left circle. If he's in the bumper, that means Braden Point probably is going to the left side of the ice, where Point spent some time last year, both before and after Bjorkstrand arrived. Point does not have the one-timer that Stamkos has. But they may have to adjust a little bit, Greg. And again, I'm not the coach here, and I'm not speaking with the level of expertise that the players who are on the power play can speak with, or Jeff Halpern. But there are certain things you could do. You could get the puck across and not try and score on the one-timer, but get it to the net. Get it quickly to the net, and then you have a scramble play in front, right? That's an option. Another option would be to have Kucherov shoot more. So if Hedman is the guy at the point, Hedman is not available for a one-timer. But Hedman can sell the pass to Kucherov, and Kucherov can shoot a one-timer, which Kucherov will do. So Kucherov has to make the decision that, like, I'm going to be the trigger. I'm going to be the first kind of domino to fall here with a puck to the net, and then see where things go from there. And if he does shoot on the power play, but often he likes to control it and find a teammate. Those are just a couple of things that they could do. But I think the key is to try and open up the option for the player at that left face-off circle, who probably does need to be a righty, and see if that is a threat, it will open up other areas on the ice for Kucherov to pick apart a penalty kill unit. Those are my thoughts on day one of training camp after what we saw last year. The second unit, which got way less time, I actually thought was pretty effective. Like they chipped in some goals, usually with very little power play time. Part of that is Radish was out there and he can bomb it. And, he helped generate some of that. They were a little bit more meat and potatoes. So we'll see. But I think if Kucherov is at the right circle, which is his preferred spot, having a lefty at the left circle limits what Kucherov can do in terms of setting up his teammates. And we heard that directly from him in that soundbite.
It's a good point. It's probably one of the, if not the most intriguing aspect of the Lightning heading into this season, because it has been such a vital component to their success. They're going to have to find different ways to manufacture offense from that unit, knowing that you don't have that big one-timer. And now you've had a year to kind of look at what worked and what didn't. And to Kuch's point, you're looking at the playoffs, and really that's when you need to be clicking or to make a difference if you can. Get caught up with everything you need to know about the Lightning every morning with the Daily Strike podcast. In 5 minutes or less, you're going to hear from the players and coaches, Mish's highlights, news notes, this date in Lightning history, and so much more. The Daily Strike is available anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Is that starting tomorrow?
It's already started. It's a great
What?
show.
I didn't realize that.
Didn't Steve do one yesterday?
I missed it. Sorry,
I
Steve.
think he did. I think he did. Yeah, see, look, it started yesterday.
Oh, that's
I
my
listen.
bad.
I'm
usually
listening.
a very loyal. Well,
You are.
usually I am a loyal listener.
Yeah.
I just didn't know that the wheels had started on the
Oh,
train
yeah,
and it left
Steve
the
couldn't
station.
wait. Steve couldn't
All
wait.
right.
He had to get going. All right, let's get to a bunch of questions here, partner,
Yeah,
as
let's do
we
that.
finish off things here. Andrew on X, at what game number do you guys expect Max Crozier to start being a lineup regular?
Well, it could be game one.
It could be.
I mean, look, he's in the mix, and I think he's going to be on the team. They wouldn't have walked away from the Perbix contract, which, look, he was due a raise. But I think part of the reason why they were willing to let Perbix leave was they had Crozier. And
Correct.
Crozier is ready. The
He is.
specificity of that question, though, Andrew, like that's up to the coaches. So...
Andrew,
But
also,
he's going to be playing. I mean, especially at the start of the year. He's going to be playing.
Andrew also said to that point, I want to note that Lilleberg Crozier looked great in 2023-24 and had the best expected goals percentage in limited time together last year. Maybe
Well, you know how
I'm not
feel about
disagreeing with you.
expected goals, but
Yeah, I mean,
eye
they look
test
good.
wise, there is no question.
look good.
Yes.
They look good. Addie on Facebook says, welcome back, guys. Happy to hear your voices. Missed the podcast. Eric on YouTube. LFG, hockey's back, baby. Always makes me a little chuckle. Dustin on X says, the Lightning did not add the correct pieces to fit the new style league. They didn't add anyone who will go out and quite literally sucker punch other teams' best players. They had the chance to add 2 bubble player goons to do the dirty.
Well, look, this.
What do you make of that
probably-
narrative?
I think the Lightning. So the Lightning had Pat Maroon when they were winning their cups, and they had Luke
Part of
Shen,
the
they had Bogosian.
part of the Lightning
So look,
broadcast this year.
yeah.
That
Well,
one,
yes, I just named a
Yeah,
couple
yeah,
of them, right?
right. Yeah, yeah.
So I'm not saying that they haven't had players like that, but I'm also not saying that they don't have any players like that. I mean, Lilleberg can handle himself. Chernak can handle himself. They have some guys who are capable of fighting. You know who could probably handle himself pretty
Hagel.
well? We didn't
Hagel
see a
can-
lot. Hagel can
Brandon
handle
Hagel.
himself. I wouldn't say he's a heavyweight and he would sucker punch somebody in the face, nor that I'm encouraging a player to sucker punch another player in the face. But I think Geeky can handle himself.
Sorelli
we
can
talked
handle
about
himself.
him.
Sorelli
Right.
can handle himself.
So
Yeah.
the Lightning are not. The Lightning would not be adding a player simply because he is a quote unquote goon. And goons don't really exist in the NHL anymore unless they can.
They gotta play.
Don't, because
play a
a
little.
player who would fit that description can do a bunch of other things. So they're not only a fighter. This is certainly a change from when I was growing up, when you were growing up, Greg, watching the sport. So Dustin and I respectfully disagree. So there are a couple of things at play here in terms of what they did and did not do during the offseason. Part of it was they like their team. Julian likes his team. So he was not inclined to make big changes. Now, what Dustin is saying is that these were kind of players that were more, I don't even know the players he's referring to, but he was like, they could have added some players like that. The other part is like, there just wasn't, and this wouldn't apply for somebody making the league minimum, but like the Lightning didn't have a lot. They had some room, but they didn't have a lot of room to go and add like a $4 and $5 million player. Otherwise, they would have been over the cap or right up against the cap again. So look, they made the additions they felt would help their team. I think fans are really going to be impressed, surprisingly impressed with Holmberg. I'm surprised the Leafs walked away from this guy. He's going to slot in really, really well with the Lightning. But kind of contrary to what Dustin wanted, like Pontus Holmberg is not going to go out and sucker punch somebody in the face. But I think he's going to be a great asset to what the Tampa Bay Lightning are going to try and do this year. So which sort of player do you want? You know, a guy who can slot in on your bottom six, kill penalties, win faceoffs, play hard, smart, knows the game, responsible defensively. These are all assets that Holmberg brings to the lineup. But he probably wouldn't be classified as a tough guy. Definitely not.
No.
That was the guy the Lightning brought in, though. Really the prominent guy for their bottom six who's going to be in the lineup regularly.
I think the further we get away from the Cup years, people often look back and probably, to a degree, overinflate the importance of certain players and what they brought to the table. That's not to minimize what they did. But, you know, the league is more about skating and forechecking. And, you know, Zach Bogosian, Pat Maroon, Luke Shen, they all had a role, but they all could play when they were with the Lightning. And I think you need to find that balance because, to your point, you're not just going to have somebody out there who, you know, even Austin Watson, who played X amount of minutes, you know, is he going to find himself playing in the playoffs necessarily? So
And I mean,
think
he
you have
went
to
to
pick
Detroit
and choose
last
that.
year and barely
Yeah.
played in the NHL.
So I think you have to, it's just not, the league's not that way anymore. And I think the Lightning do have some guys who can stand up for themselves.
I think, Dustin, I don't want to speak for you, but some of this may be, again, tying back to the Panthers. The Panthers play a rough They play a mean game.
They do.
It works for them, and that's kind of their DNA. So does that mean that you have to like match them, kind of act for act? I mean, if the Lightning's power play had done a little bit more in the playoffs last year, maybe that would have settled things down.
Sure.
Right? Like you're more hesitant to toe the line or cross the line if you know that the other team's power play is going to shred you apart. That didn't happen. So you have to build your team.
I agree.
If Lightning fans are not happy with the team that the Lightning have built, they're going to let us know, certainly, but they have two choices. They can either like get behind the team that's there or choose not to root for that team. Personally, I think the Lightning have built a team that is certainly capable of winning a Stanley Cup and matching up against a variety of different opponents.
That's what we asked.
But that's one person's opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I think that's right. I think that's the way to look at it. Timmy says on Facebook, any thoughts on why they didn't re-sign Nick Perbix? Was it just money?
Well, he was
money
due
and
a
they were
raise.
ready.
Yeah, so they have a little bit of cap room. So,
Yeah.
I mean, depending on what they wanted to do, it's possible they could have re-signed him. He did get a raise going to Nashville. Maybe his agent was looking for a number the Lightning were uncomfortable giving, but also I think with Crozier waiting in the wings, it would be ignorant of us not to acknowledge that, as in like we're just putting blinders on. Like that had to have been part of the decision
equation
process. Yeah,
It happens, and that's just what they say. It's business. Don't be offended by it. Boomer on X. Thoughts on Gonzalez being the second line right winger? I personally think he's earned it based off of last season. Hope it stays, or hope he stays. Probably won't.
Well, the probably won't is that Coop does mix things up a lot.
Yeah.
Sometimes when things are flat, but sometimes just because he likes having different guys gain experience playing with different guys. Usually, two of the members of a line stay together, though, and I would expect that Hagel and Cirelli are going to be playing together a lot, as they did last year.
Let's get to this one. Chris on Facebook, besides the Nick Paul injury, Sergey, what is both of your top storylines going into the start of the season? I think we started to hit on that a little bit. I think for me, the bottom D pair, I think will be interesting. Just who do they go with? How many players they start this season with on the back end? And I think based off of your question to Cooch and, what we spent 10 minutes on is, what's that power play going to look like, not only in the regular season, but in the postseason? And have they been able to find a formula partner that works for them now, knowing that obviously you're a year beyond Steven Stamkos and you need to fill that void in some capacity?
Well, this may not be a very satisfying answer for fans, and they're like, this is a boring storyline, but I think it's the base building block of the pyramid, and was a big reason why the Lightning had the year that they had last year, and they kind of overcame it 2 years ago. You have to be able to defend. So as much as we talk about the power play, right, as much as we can acknowledge that particularly early in the regular season, we're going to see some lopsided scores and all of that. But remember how often by the end of the year, we look at those top 16 defensive teams and how many of those 16 defensive teams at the top half are the 16 teams that get into the playoffs. If it's not 16 out of 16, it's usually 15 out of 16 or maybe 14 out of 16. 2 years ago, the Lightning bucked the trend. They were, I think, 21st or 22nd defensively. They got in the playoffs, in large part because their power play was number one, and they scored a lot of goals. Last year, they were in the top five in goals allowed per game and in 5-on-5 differential, which is the other one. So the top storyline for me is, can the Lightning follow up what they did well in the regular season last year defensively into this year? And a big part of that is going to be kind of the two-pronged aspect of McDonough and Vasilevsky. If Vasi plays like he did last year, the Lightning are, and not 2 years ago where he had an injury and was coming back from injury, like Vasi looked much more like Vasi last year in the regular season, certainly. And McDonough's return was transformational for the Lightning's overall team game. So to me, it's like, are we going to see the same?
Yeah. And, look, there's going to be some younger players that make an impression in these preseason games, and maybe there's an opportunity. I mentioned Finley, but then there's Duke, and then there's some other guys.
He can handle himself too.
Yeah,
Finley.
Geeky, somebody you mentioned. I think. All right, what does it look like now? The second year, you had that first year of ups and downs, but you got a good taste of the National Hockey League, how to be a professional, and where's your growth? Because let's face it, he has the chance to be an impactful player for them based off his size and his skill set. And I think that's going to be something we monitor as well. By the way, tickets to the 2026 Navy Federal Credit Union NHL Stadium Series outdoor game between the Lightning and Bruins are on sale now at Ticketmaster.com. The game will be at Raymond James Stadium Sunday, February 1st, 2026. That'll be a lot of fun. Nick on YouTube, partner, says, any interesting lineup things we should look out for this weekend?
Well, this weekend there'll be some scrimmages, and they'll probably mix up the groups.
Yeah.
So, like, the point line and the Sorelli line will not be on the same team in the scrimmage. They'll be playing against each other. It's usually how it works.
Yeah.
But I think it's more interesting to look to next week when the Lightning start seeing other teams and like who's getting into games. Like Max Groshev playing D. Are we going to see him play, which is a new position, right? I didn't see any of the prospect games that were taking place at Wesley Chapel last weekend. I had other things going on. I had a birthday too, so I had some stuff going on that day, Saturday.
You had life. You had
yes,
life going on.
I had life. I did not make it to Wesley Chapel, but I saw Brian since then, and he's like, Brian, felt that Groshev showed as well as any other player for the Lightning in that tournament. Now, keep in mind, Groshev is entering his third year pro. Some of the players in that tournament were like, it was their first kick at the can, but it is still a relatively new position for him. So how is that going to look? How are some of these guys that we'll say are on the bubble going to treat this preseason? Dylan Duke, right?
Yeah.
Got in a couple of games last year. Carlisle. I mean, based on how things were running today, he was the number 8 defenseman. Is he going to kind of grab a hold of that and force the Lightning's hand? Maybe they're like, we're going to keep 13 forwards and 8 defensemen because Carlisle showed so well. So that's where these preseason games can be interesting. And not so much like, what does the power play look like? Because it's going to be a revolving door of different players. And, how's Victor Hedman looking? I mean, it's not really that. It's more about kind of the prospects. How do they look? If we saw them last year, can we notice that they took a step forward? The guys who are contending for some of these spots, either to make the team at the start of the year or, as I said, tap management on the shoulder and say, like, okay, maybe I'm not starting the year, but don't forget about me. I made my mark in this preseason. And, when you have an injury a month into the season, I'm the guy. Call me up. So that's really what we get out of these early preseason games.
We'll talk more about this, I'm sure, as the season progresses. Another, I think, interesting position to look at, probably more depth-wise, is the goaltending position. And I say that because there was some rumblings. I think Pierre LeBrun had something in the Athletic about Connor Ingram, who was recently put on waivers.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
And the Lightning were a team he brought up because of familiarity, but also uncertainty beyond Johansson and Vasi to a degree.
Well, you got Halverson, who got in, the NHL last year, and Ryan Fanti is probably the guy 4th, I would say, on the depth chart, and then you've got Menningen, who showed well, and he also showed well in the prospect tournament. And a guy they drafted this past year, Heil, is I think how you say his name, Heil. And those are the 6 goalies that are in camp. So I think the Lightning actually feel, from what I've heard, pretty good.
They feel good.
Their goaltending depth.
Yeah.
But beyond Vasi and Johansson, there's no question that Connor Ingram has much, much more overall experience and NHL experience than any of the other guys that I mentioned.
Just something that, as I throw it out there, as we get going there. All right, so partner, first show in the books.
Yes,
we got some.
And I'm going to be
You're off tomorrow.
punching my clock out tomorrow. Yeah, I have some personal stuff happening
Personal
this
stuff, though.
weekend.
Yes, for sure.
I will be back on Monday though for an actual game broadcast.
It'll be fun.
Just want to make the fans aware, if they aren't already aware, the Spot, which is the new over-the-air broadcast partner for the Lightning, the final 5 preseason games will be aired on the Spot, channel 66, but it depends how you get your television
Yeah.
channels. It's not always 66.
Sure.
So Dave Randorf and Brian Engblom will be doing the final 5 games on the Spot. We'll be doing all 7, but the first 2 are radio only. Although I think that because they're both road games, I think Carolina and Nashville, the first 2 opponents, do provide a stream.
They usually do. They usually do. I feel like Nashville always does, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you said? Yeah. So.
But usually if there's a preseason game on TV for the Lightning, it's maybe 1,
Yeah.
if any. This year it's a little different because they got the new partner and they want to promote it, and they want to make sure if there are any kinks to work out, they work them out before the first actual game. Yeah,
I get it.
That makes a lot of sense.
Well, we'll be thinking about you
Monday
tomorrow.
will be Lightning at Carolina.
Yeah.
We'll have our show. Team leaves in the afternoon. We'll have the game roster then, and you have a good show tomorrow on a good weekend.
Thank you, sir. It's good talking to you. We'll be thinking about you tomorrow. We'll talk to you on Monday. Eric Erlinson from LightningInsider.com, also part of our radio broadcast, will be joining me tomorrow, filling in for you, Mish. So we'll talk to E, get his thoughts on expectations, what he's looking for in camp, and heading into the preseason portion of the schedule. Partner, great job, as always. Glad to be back
too.
doing it with you. Steve Versnick as well. You've been listening to Power Lunch right here on Lightning Radio.